Okay, so bell ringer for today. Oh, there we go. Describe the achievements of the Articles of Confederation. So we will go over the activity from yesterday. I will come around and check that towards, how about the end of class? And then I want to move on today and talk about some disputes, some issues with the Articles of Confederation and the start of the United States and rebellions and actions against the U.S. from the very beginning. Oh boy. So I'll give you some time to work on that. Is there a game today, Jeffrey?
No, not canceled.
The girls' game get canceled too? Don't know. Thought your little sis would let you know. You don't talk to her. They're in school. Oh my gosh.
Volleyball games.
Is it?
Imagine.
Volleyball, it's inside.
I imagine the girls game probably is.
I would think so.
I mean, Indiana, I heard got it pretty much.
Yeah.
I feel always
Is it? Yeah. Casey, all finished? Okay.
I'll get this to you.
All right, nice poster.
Yeah,
Okay.
I made a copy and we have one in the guidance office, but that way it'll remind your kids, I'll see it here for sure.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Internet down yet for everybody? Still. Well, hopefully it's still going for a Zoom chat. I don't know if you're recording that. But anyway, let's go over this real quick. Describe the achievements of the Articles of Confederation. What do we have? What do we got? So if you had to, maybe you could write it down on a piece of paper, or you could have put it in your notes app maybe. I don't think you'll have to need internet for that. But then you can just copy and paste it over. If you use it, if you put it on Google Docs, whatever you guys do. But describe the achievements of the Articles of Confederation. What do we have? What do we got? What's one of them? I know we talked about a few of them yesterday. Jeffrey?
It's the legislative branch.
Okay, all right. Good job. Under the Articles of Confederation, what type of legislation did they have? Was it two house, one house? What was it? Jamie? One, unicameral. Good job, unicameral. That was one of your vocab terms. Good. And obviously that's going to be a topic of debate when we get to the development of the Constitution and what should happen then. But what else do we have? What's another achievement? of the Articles of Confederation. That's a good one, Jeffrey. I didn't mention that too much yesterday. Rem, do you have your hand up? You have your phone in your hand. Put it away. I saw it. I saw it. Can't hide it from me. Come on, man. Come on. You know better. What do we have? What do we got? Another achievement. Chase, what do you have? Okay, because of the weaknesses, because of how weak the central government was, it obviously needed some sort of, I guess you could say, renovation, right? It needed to be rehauled and fixed up moving forward. Okay, what else? What else? Even though this was a weaker central government, what was the outcome of the Revolutionary War? What did we end? What did we sign with Great Britain? Chase? Yeah, Treaty of what? Paris. Yep, good job. 1783. Good, good. And when it comes to advancing and expanding out into the frontier with the Northwest Ordinance, this allowed for new territories like Ohio, okay, moving down into parts of Kentucky, let's say, West Virginia. As they expand, as the frontier is being expanded, that means these territories will eventually become states and they'll have the same equal rights as these states that were already established, the 13 original colony states. So that will set up for the full credit and faith clause, which will allow these citizens to have the same rights as people in these 13 original colonies, these 13 states. So the Articles of Confederation, even though there were 6 weaknesses that we described and talked about, it did have some achievements. Okay, all right, so today we're going to talk about some issues that push for this dramatic change, that push for a stronger central government and the creation of the Constitution. All right, are there any questions on that? You guys good? Awesome. Vocab terms for today, just 2. Just 2. We got Shay's Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion. So we got to dive into a little bit of American History 1 here. I know this is more Mr. Henninger's forte, but hey, you get to mention a little bit here in government. This sets up Argo. Give you another minute or 2 to write down these definitions. We'll move on. Your Wi-Fi working now, Matt? Oh. Okay, all right. So today we're going to talk about Shay's Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion. And like I said, I think it's important to talk about these two rebellions, these revolts in American history in its young age, and how this pushes for a dramatic change in government for the United States. Okay, we'll talk about some of these foundations to the U.S. government and the Constitution here within the next, probably next week. We'll mention some of these foundations and where the founding fathers look towards for help to help create what we know as the United States today, the strongest country in the world, the superpower we know of it today. Okay, so Shay's Rebellion. Shay's Rebellion. I was going to have you read out of the book, but I'll just talk about it a little bit today. Discuss Shay's Rebellion and the effects of it, along with the Whiskey Rebellion. And then tomorrow, I'll have just a short quote from Henry Knox, who was a general during that time period for George Washington, and how he describes this Whiskey Rebellion and maybe how it, with Shay's Rebellion. And then he talks a little bit about how, you know what, he understands why people are upset and why the rebellion occurred. And if it's a top military official of George Washington doing this, then maybe there are opinions that need to be met and something needs to change with the current government in the US. So Shay's Rebellion, what do we know so far about it? What do we know? Sure, you guys heard of it already with Mr. Henninger. Remington? Okay, all right. So in the western part of Massachusetts, and what was it all about? What's that? A debate? Okay, all right. Why were these people like Daniel Shea and these western frontiersmen upset? In this case, Massachusetts state government. What was the state doing? After the Revolutionary War, what kind of burden did the United States have? What burden did they have? Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Millions of dollars in debt.
Yeah, good job. Millions and millions of dollars of debt. So how are they going to try to make up that debt? What do they need to do? Tax. Yeah, set tariffs. Good job. So with that being said, these frontiersmen, these people that took part in the Revolutionary War, now they're paying taxes to this new form government that they fought to break away, obviously. I fought for to break away from Great Britain. And already in America's short, young origins, we see disputes and crises amongst the people, specifically in the western portion of these states, not just Massachusetts. We'll talk about the Whiskey Rebellion in Pennsylvania. Okay. So to try to pay back some of these debts, the state of Massachusetts, and not only Massachusetts, but all the states, start taxing these individuals for certain products, on certain products. Okay. And they try to make up some money to pay back these debts. So Daniel Shea, he was, like I said, mentioned, he was in the western portion of Massachusetts, and he was trying to bring together a lot of people for this cause. He's like, hey, why all of a sudden are we having to pay these taxes? We fought a war to try to break away from the tyranny, from the absolute monarch of Great Britain. Okay, we weren't represented whatsoever. Do you think there was a lack of representation still during that time for America, in the beginning origins of the United States? Yeah, there were a lack of representation. Okay, the eastern portion of each state, that's where the state houses were located. That's where all the representatives were located, these political officials. So when you move out more towards the frontier, obviously the population would dwindle a little bit and people's voices weren't heard. Okay, that's what they call an east versus west divide. So I'm sure you'll talk about that with Mr. Henninger a lot. There's a huge divide when it comes to representation based off of the eastern portion of each state, even Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, obviously. Okay, now when you think of the United States and its origins, the beginning of it, and obviously Independence Hall, a lot of the representation, a lot of politics is performed and done in the eastern portion of the states at that time. When you look at the electoral college, when you look at voting, okay, what kind of determines each state from being Democrat or Republican? What areas? Cities, good job, good job. So we can kind of relate today of what was going on back then, right? So these larger urban areas were really dictating of what went on, what occurred in these states when it comes to decision making at the political level. Does that make sense, guys? So these people in the frontier, they didn't really have a voice. Okay, their voices weren't heard, and in a way, their representation lacked compared to people located in the eastern portion of the state. Right. So now all of a sudden, even though these people don't have much representation, they kind of dwindle off on their own, and they kind of made their own, I guess you could say, civilizations out there for the point of religious reasons, for the point of trying to be free. And now all of a sudden, these tax collectors come out to the frontier and say, hey, you got to pay up your fair share. And obviously, Daniel Shea, who fought in a Revolutionary War, was not all for this. And many other individuals, too, that reside in the frontier. It's like, wait a minute, this is going to be like a broken record here. This is like almost on repeat of the same situation, the issues that we had with Great Britain. Now, the United States, being a young nation, is trying to tax the people living out in the frontier that really don't have too much representation. Right. So Daniel Shea and a lot of farmers, a lot of members out in the frontier, they march onto close to Boston, right, the eastern portion of Massachusetts, and they cause an uprising. They cause a rebellion to the point where they wanted to take down the state of Massachusetts. So, with that being said, do you think there was a lot of people trying to push back against these individuals, these farmers? Or was there really a standing army at that time to put down this rebellion? A national standing army, a federal military? No, no. It was up to the state militias to try to put these rebellions and these riots down. So when it came down to it, there's no one to try to stop them, right? Finally, George Washington and many of these members of the Articles of Confederation asked states that surrounded Massachusetts to raise a military, raise their militia to try to push down this rebellion. And that's exactly what happened. Finally, after a bit of time, these militias, okay, from states that surrounded Massachusetts, put down this quarrel, put down this issue. But this obviously raised some eyebrows for many of the founding fathers, like George Washington. It's like, what can we do here, right? We can't just tax these individuals. And let's say a rebellion happens like this, where they're not keen on our decisions. What must we do? Well, we need to have the ability to raise an army to try to put down these disputes, these rebellions. So do you think everybody actually loved George Washington back in the day? If he was going to use the military on his own people, if they're not going to pay their taxes? No, no. So maybe we should look at George Washington in a different light. I'm not trying to change your opinion on him, but not everybody agreed. Okay, not everybody agreed with his decision making. And this push for the need of a stronger national government, a stronger federal government. Just this one rebellion alone. So, rebellion of 1,200 farmers, I already mentioned that. Pretty basic on taxes. Okay, these tax collectors that would come out into the frontier, obviously they weren't treated too well. This was a job that no one really wanted. Why? Because they were beaten to death. A lot of times these people were tarred and feathered. I'm sure you know the examples of that. All right, these tar and feather, this hot molten tar that would literally melt the skin off of people. And they'd throw feathers on them, try to make them look like chickens in a way. But for the most part, when these tax collectors were tarred and feathered, they didn't survive. Right? This molten tar, this hot tar literally melted their skin off to a point that even boiled through their skulls and killed them. Right? It wasn't just like this fun antics for some of these frontiersmen that were trying to be taxed. Right? Yeah, they had fun with it, but this actually killed many individuals, even if they survived. Okay, their skin was destroyed really, and disease, sickness would carry bacteria infections, and they would die a gruesome, terrible death. So these tax collectors really weren't fared well too much in the frontier. Also, they would hang these tax collectors out in the middle of their town centers. So they'd hang them up, string them up, and they'd almost look at it as, hey, the next time a tax collector comes out here, they'll see that other tax collector hung up by his neck in the town center. So he'll turn right around and head back home. He's not going to try to venture out here to collect his taxes on the frontier. Pretty gruesome stuff, right? Terrible. And what was the town center at that time? Where do you think many communities and towns, what did they put at their center? What were they revolved heavily on, you think? I know I'm getting on a tangent here. I apologize, but I like getting into this portion of history. It's interesting. What's in the town center of pretty much every town? We have a church street, right? Yeah, so people, individuals of the church stringing up these tax collectors. The ministers kind of leading the charge, right? For the most part, the ministers were the only educated citizens that could read, that could write, that could communicate these beliefs to the other people. Can you imagine that? The minister, the priest of these churches, hey, let's string up some tax collectors. Let's have a good time. That'd be crazy to think about today. But that's exactly what happened. All right. Last thing here, real quick, the Whiskey Rebellion. Same thing that kind of occurred this time in 1791, and this traveled all the way to 1794. The most famous was in Pennsylvania in Western PA, right near where State College is located, actually. And this traveled down even into North Carolina as well. But these whiskey rebellions occurred all across the country, really. But most specifically, we'll talk about Pennsylvania. Why not, right? We're in PA, and this is the most famous one. And what do you think the central government decided to tax? Whiskey, right? Whiskey. So because there was really no standard currency at that time, what do you think people used to pay each other? Whiskey, alcohol. That was a type of currency at that moment because not many people trusted the currency of the United States. Not many people really thought that it was worth anything. And we all know with the Articles of Confederation, all these states had these different forms of currency. So when it came down to it, it's like, well, is it really worth anything? Nah, let's just pay each other in whiskey. It's almost like that one commercial with Trident Layers. You guys ever see that? Trident Layers? Oh, he paid me in gum. Oh, great. I don't know. You guys got to check it out on your own. But yeah, so whiskey at that time was a form of currency. That's what everybody dove into at that time, especially out in the Western frontier. Okay, if you build someone's house, well, we'll pay them in whiskey rather than this currency if we have no idea what it's really worth. And we all know the same issues in Pennsylvania as in Massachusetts, this East versus West divide. Much of the representation was focused in Philadelphia, an eastern portion of the state. Not much representation in the western portion of the state. These people really didn't have a say in government, didn't have the ability to participate as much. Okay. So their voices weren't heard too much. And the central government tried to pay back these debts from the Revolutionary War. Well, let's put a tax on whiskey, which is, like I mentioned, currency for these people. This was like money, and they're taxing it. Unbelievable. So this pushed George Washington to, again, bring these state militias that surrounded Pennsylvania and these people in the eastern part of the state that went along with Washington and this national government. And they marched out into the western frontier. And for the most part, these individuals kind of scattered off. They left. They're doing the same things to these tax collectors, stringing them up, killing them, tar and feather them. And finally, George Washington sent his troops out to try to put down this rebellion, put down these disputes. Okay. Again, what does that show George Washington as? What does it show him as, Brock? Yeah, right. It almost shows him like as a tyrant, right? A military Mongol almost. Like he'll do anything just to make sure that people would abide by his rule and pay their fair share, right? But this set a precedent from here on out that, you know what, in times of issues like this, where there's protests, rebellions, and riots, the national government needs to have a standing army to put down these quarrels, to put down these grievances, to put down these issues. But think about it, though. These people were also the ones that fought for George Washington in the Revolutionary War. This was a sticky situation, wasn't it? Yeah. So these two rebellions especially pushed the United States to try to develop a stronger central government, try to develop more of a federal government that really had more power than these states, and to make sure that, you know what, we do have to tax our individuals. We need to do this to try to pay back our debts and to build a standing army that we can eventually have peace, but at the same time have authority, have power with a central government. All right. Are there any questions on that? We good? Whiskey Rebellion flag's actually that one in the back. I thought it was neat. I thought it was pretty cool. So I bought it off of Amazon. I thought it was interesting anyway. So if you ever see that flag, that's what it's about, the Whiskey Rebellion. Pretty cool. All right, so last slide here, guys. Many realize the need for a stronger national government after these two rebellions, okay? Mainly Shay's rebellion, and then the United States kind of adjusting, forming a stronger central government. The Whiskey Rebellion was the result of that. Well, George Washington can now take this standing army, march out into the frontier, and put down these disputes, put down these rebellions against the United States over mainly taxes. Again, many military officials like Henry Knox, I'm sure you heard of Fort Knox before, right? Where all the gold is. Yeah, so he actually spoke about this to Washington and said, listen, we need to really square these issues away. Okay, these individuals fought for us in the Revolutionary War. We can't treat them like really cattle, right? We can't treat them without representation. We need to figure out a stronger way where we can give representation out to the western portion of the states and show that we're not tyrannical, show that we're not an absolute authority like they once had with Great Britain. All right, so in 1787, 12 states send delegates to Philadelphia to revise the Articles of Confederation. 12? Where's the other one? Who do you think's missing? Who was left out? Who do you think decided not to send a delegate to Philadelphia to revise this here? What state? I kind of mentioned them before with the currency, the one weakness. They were printing off a lot of money, it caused a lot of inflation. And it was almost impossible to realize exactly their worth, their dollar worth. Jeffrey?
New Hampshire?
No, it's up there though. It's a smaller state. Jeffrey?
Connecticut.
No. No. Rhode Island. There you go. Rhode Island. Rhode Island. Why? Because, well, their state was based a lot off of religious freedoms, and they believed that they didn't think we should have a strong central government, that the state should decide their matters to what they desired. Okay. All right. So that's it for those two rebellions and the need for change, the need for a stronger central government, but at the same time, making sure representation was equal through the western portion of the state and the eastern portion. All right, so now I want to go over the activity from yesterday real quick. Let me see here. The weaknesses to the Articles of Confederation. Pretty simple political cartoon. Find it. There. Pretty simple. And I'm going to come around and check them after I go over it with you real quick. All right, so what do we got here? Who wants to describe it? What's going on? What's going on? Madden, what do you have? What did you write down? Just describe the basic means of this political cartoon. Yeah, so it says what? Rough sailing ahead. And it's just showing that, you know, with this new form of government that just broke off from Great Britain, that there are a lot of treacherous waters, right? The waters are not steady. And if this boat continues on this path, most likely it's going to be wrecked. It's going to be destroyed. And the waves indicating the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. right? And we all know no taxation, no judiciary branch, no executive, okay, no standard currency, you name it, the list goes on and on. And the ways are going to soon, eventually, wreck this boat, wreck this ship, what we know as the Articles Confederation. So if we don't change it, if we don't try to move in the right direction, these rebellions, these revolts are going to keep on occurring, like Shay's rebellion, right? Like the Whiskey Rebellion. And this was kind of kickback for these individuals like Alexander Hamilton and George Washington pushing for a stronger national government. Many people didn't want it. And we all paint this picture of George Washington beloved by everybody. Okay, we actually, not many people liked him too much because of he knew we needed a stronger national government, a stronger central government. Okay, many individuals kicked back. They respected him, but they still kicked back against some of his decisions. We all know the US needed a stronger central government, though, to push past these issues. All right, is there any questions? You guys good? Good, good, good. I'm gonna come around and check those political cartoons. What's up, buddy?
I just love my pictures. Man.
Your pictures?
Yeah, these.
Oh, where do you get those? At the office?